Someone tied a strip of bright blue tarp to a pine like a message, and the man who lived alone noticed it because nothing changed out there unless a person made it change. In 2012, deep in Oklahoma's Kiamichi Mountains, that small marker led him to a place he had avoided for years, and it led someone else straight to his cabin. By the time he understood what the blue strips meant, the search volunteer in the orange vest had vanished from the woods without a single call for help, and a body lay in an old hunting clearing with its pockets turned out. The stranger who walked in from the tree line spoke like a neighbor, acted like he belonged, and watched the off-grid man's tools and doors the way a thief watches locks. Before sundown, a trap meant for a leg would force a choice, and a collapsing bridge would decide who made it out and who did not. When law enforcement finally arrived, they would find proof that the missing people out there were not accidents, and they would find one detail that made the whole thing feel planned long before that day ever started. Let me tell you exactly how it went. At the time, I was 34. I was living off the grid, mostly because I didn't have the patience or the money to keep doing life the normal way. I had burned through a steady job, a lease, and a relationship in 1 year, and I decided I would rather build something small with my hands than keep explaining myself to people who only listened long enough to judge. My cabin sat in a fold of timber where the pines stayed thick and the wind moved slow. I built it from rough-sawn lumber and scavenged metal roofing. I ran a modest solar setup that powered a lantern, a radio for weather, and a small battery charger. I hauled water from a spring that ran clear even in late summer. I did not have internet. I did not have a landline. I had a prepaid phone that worked only if I walked up to a specific ridge and held it toward a certain stretch of sky. The only person who knew my exact spot was my cousin Micah. He had a steady job, a normal house, and the kind of calm that comes from knowing your life will look the same next month. He didn't romanticize my setup. He treated it like a project that needed maintenance, like a boat or an old truck. If I asked for a part, he brought it. If I said I was fine, he believed me. Micah pulled in mid-morning with a box of roofing screws, a bucket of sealant, and a cooler of food. He climbed out and squinted at my cabin like he was checking for fresh damage. He said I looked half feral. I told him he looked loud. That was our style of affection. We ate standing at my counter because I didn't own a table big enough for company. Micah pointed at the roof seam and told me the ridge cap would leak if I didn't deal with it soon. I told him I had the sealant ready. He told me he didn't drive that far to watch me procrastinate. Then he handed me a bottle of water like he expected me to forget I needed it. Around 10 a.m., while we carried ladders and lined up screws, I heard a vehicle working in low gear out on the old access road. I froze for a moment because nobody drove that road unless they had a reason. My cabin didn't sit on a marked trail, and there was nothing scenic about the approach. The road itself looked like a scar that the forest had started to erase. A white county truck stopped at a brushy turnout where the trees opened. A woman got out wearing a faded orange vest and a ball cap. She moved carefully, with her hands out, like she understood what it felt like to walk into a stranger's space. She called out a greeting before she got too close, and her voice sounded tired rather than nervous. I met her at the edge of my clearing. I did not invite her farther in, and she did not push it. She introduced herself as Kara Bentley and said she was part of a volunteer search group that worked with the sheriff's office when resources were stretched. She kept her explanation short, like she had told it many times. 2 fishermen didn't come back out, she said. They left their truck by the creek 3 days ago. We're checking the ridges and the ravines. Micah stepped onto the porch behind me, wiping his hands. Kara saw him and relaxed slightly, as if 2 men were easier to read than one. She told us there were 3 other volunteers staged at the trailhead and that her job was to walk high ground and look for anything that didn't belong. We don't need to come through your cabin area, she said. But the quickest line to the next ridge passes near your spring. We'll stay on the trail and leave everything the way we found it. I thought about refusing. I also thought about people sitting injured somewhere, counting on a stranger to do the decent thing. I told her she could pass near the spring, but to avoid the ravine because it got slick and steep. She nodded and thanked me, then hesitated like she had one more thing she wanted to say. There have been other missing people out here, she said quietly. Not just these fishermen. A teenage girl last year, a contractor a few months back. Folks keep acting like it's just the woods being the woods. Micah shrugged like he didn't want to take the bait. Kara looked at him and then at me. "Sometimes it isn't the woods," she said. "Sometimes it's somebody using the woods." She left before I could ask more, and her truck rolled away with a sound that faded too fast for how much it bothered me. Micah tried to lighten it. He said she sounded like she watched too much television. I didn't argue, but my mind stayed on the way she said it, like it came from something she had seen, not something she imagined. We went back to work because work is how you keep your thoughts from running wild. We sealed seams, set screws, and tightened flashing until the roof looked solid again. The sun climbed and the heat followed. By noon, sweat ran down my back, and the metal roof threw light like a mirror. Micah ate a sandwich in the shade and asked when I planned to buy a real chair. I told him the stump by the fire pit counted as furniture. After lunch, I headed toward the shed to grab my axe and deal with a dead snag that leaned toward my woodshed. Micah stayed by the porch, sorting hardware and rolling up the ladder straps. I walked past the spring, and that's where I saw the first thing that made my stomach tighten. A strip of bright blue tarp was tied around a pine at about chest height. The knot was tight and neat, and the fabric looked new, not sun-bleached or torn by wind. It was not the kind of marker a hunter used, and it was not the orange ribbon Kara carried. It looked deliberate, like a signal meant for someone who already knew to look for blue. I stood there longer than I should have, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. No voices, no footsteps. Just the usual layers of summer sound that never tell you what's watching. I reached up and tugged the tarp strip. It didn't give. Whoever tied it wanted it to stay. I considered cutting it down, but something stopped me. Not fear exactly, more like a sense that touching it would announce me. I left it there and walked back toward the cabin with my pace controlled. Micah looked up and asked if I was good. I said I was fine. Then I went straight to my shed, because the shed was where I kept anything that mattered. The padlock hung open. I did not stare at it, hoping I was wrong. I knew what I saw. The lock wasn't broken. The hasp wasn't bent. Someone had opened it with a key or with skill, and they had done it recently because the latch still looked clean, not dusty. I stepped inside and kept my eyes moving. My tools were there, but small things sat wrong. My pry bar lay on a shelf where I never put it. My fuel can was turned so the spout faced outward. A coil of cord I didn't recognize sat in the corner like someone had placed it there and forgot it wasn't mine. I backed out and shut the door without locking it, because locking it would not matter if someone already knew how to open it. Then I walked back to the cabin and told Micah the simple version. "Somebody opened the shed," I said. Micah stared at me like he wanted to dismiss it, but my face must have been enough. He stood and followed me back. He checked the lock, the hinges, the ground. Then he went quiet in a way that made me worry more than if he had started swearing. Near the woodpile, he found the boot print, pressed deep in soft dirt. The tread didn't match either of us. It was a heavy work boot, heel dug in, toes angled as if the person stood there watching the cabin. Micah looked at me and asked if I had enemies. I told him I didn't have the kind of life that collected enemies, but I did have the kind of life that made me alone. Out there, alone is a resource to the wrong person. Micah asked what we were doing next. I told him we were going to the trailhead to find Kara's group, and we were going now. I didn't like leaving my cabin, but I liked the idea of staying even less. We walked to my truck. I turned the key. The engine turned over and died. I tried again and got nothing. I popped the hood, expecting something obvious, but everything looked normal from above. Then I knelt and looked under the frame. The fuel line had a clean slice. Micah exhaled through his nose, anger tight and contained. "That isn't bad timing," he said. "That's a person." I stood up slowly. The clearing felt too open. I wanted trees at my back and distance in front of me. I started to tell Micah to go inside when a voice came from the tree line, close enough that it sounded like the speaker had been there for a while. "You boys got trouble?" the voice asked. A man stepped out between the pines like he belonged there. He wore a gray sweatshirt, a plain ball cap, and jeans with dust on the knees. His hands hung loose at his sides. His expression carried a friendly shape, but his eyes stayed alert, measuring. He said his name was Dale. He said he was hiking through and saw the truck. He said he figured he'd offer a hand. He spoke with the casual confidence of someone who expected to be accepted. Micah didn't answer his friendliness. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. Dale pointed vaguely back into the timber. "From that way," he said, like the direction was enough. I watched his gear. He didn't have a pack. He didn't have a water bottle. His clothes looked too clean for a long walk in summer heat. He stood at a careful distance, not close enough to be grabbed, not far enough to be ignored. I told him we didn't need help and that he should keep moving. Dale kept his smile, but it thinned, like it took effort. "Hard living out here," he said. "No one around if something goes wrong." Micah shifted his weight. He told Dale to step back. Dale raised his hands slightly, not in surrender, more like a gesture to show he could play calm if we played calm. "I'm not here to start anything," he said. "I just don't like seeing people stuck." His eyes moved over my cabin and my shed and my woodpile, not as scenery, but as inventory. He noticed my solar panel frame and the stacked water jugs, the way you notice what a person can't live without. Then he did the smallest thing that changed everything. His gaze flicked past us toward the blue tarp strip near the spring, a quick check like he expected it to be there and wanted to confirm it. He didn't realize we had seen it. Micah saw the glance and reacted before I could slow him. "You been on this property," he said. Dale's smile fell away. For a second, he looked tired, like we forced him to drop an act. Then his expression tightened into something colder. "Property," he repeated. "Out here. That's funny." I told him to leave again, and this time my voice didn't carry politeness. Dale held my stare and said we could either talk or make things hard. He took one slow step backward, then turned and walked into the trees without hurry, like he controlled the pace. Micah waited until the woods swallowed him. "That's the missing people," he said quietly. I didn't say yes because I didn't want to claim certainty. I also didn't say no because my gut didn't allow it. We moved fast. I grabbed my pack and stuffed it with water, a headlamp, a first aid kit, and spare keys. Micah grabbed his bag from his truck and checked his phone, even though we both knew service wouldn't reach there. We agreed to hike to the trailhead and find Kara's group. If we got to people, we got help. If we stayed alone, we gave Dale time. We left my cabin behind and headed into the trees along the line that led toward the access road. The woods felt different once you knew someone had been in them, close, watching. Every quiet pocket started to feel intentional. 200 yards in, I saw orange ribbon hanging loose from a branch. It didn't look like a marker tied carefully. It looked like it had been yanked in a hurry. The ground below it showed scuffed dirt and broken stems, a disturbed line that angled downhill. Micah stopped and stared. "No," he said, like the word could undo it. I told him to stay behind me, and we moved slowly, scanning both sides. 20 yards down the slope, we found Kara's orange vest on the ground. It was folded once, neat, placed like a message. Kara wasn't there. Her hat wasn't there. Her radio wasn't there. The vest alone told me she didn't lose it by accident. Micah started to call her name, and I stopped him with a raised hand. I didn't want our voices traveling. I looked around and saw another blue tarp strip tied farther down, low this time, like it was meant to be seen only if you were close. The blue and the orange together felt like a map made out of people. Micah whispered that we couldn't leave her. I told him we couldn't help her by running blind into a trap. That didn't make him happy, but it made him listen. We moved on, following the signs, because not following them felt worse. The path led toward a clearing I hadn't visited in years, an old hunting spot where people used to set up coolers and folding chairs before the forest reclaimed it. When the clearing came into view, I stopped at the edge and took a long second to look before stepping out. I saw a cooler tipped on its side. I saw a small fire ring with cold ash. Then I saw the man lying on his back near the brush line, eyes open, face turned toward the sky. He wasn't a stranger to me. I recognized him from a supply store in town, Landon Reese. He worked pipeline jobs, the kind of work that sent you into remote places for weeks and paid well enough to keep you chasing it. He lay still with his pockets turned out, as if someone had searched him for keys, cash, or something specific. I didn't touch him. I didn't step close enough to leave prints near him. I just looked and let my brain accept what my eyes already knew. Micah stood behind me, breathing hard through his nose. "Is he?" he started. "He is," I said. I forced myself to scan farther. Near the center of the clearing, on a low stump, sat a glass jar. Inside the jar was a cluster of keys, more than I could count at a glance. Each key ring had a length of colored thread tied to it. Blue, orange, green. Some threads looked new, others looked faded like they'd been there a long time. My stomach turned. Keys meant lives. Keys meant vehicles and homes and storage units. Keys meant people who expected to come back for them. Behind the stump, stretched between two trees, was a tarp shelter pitched low. I saw a boot sticking out from under it. I saw a hand near the boot, fingers curled slightly, skin pale against dirt. Micah started forward, and I grabbed his arm hard enough to stop him. "Don't," I said. "Not without people." Micah's eyes went wet with anger. "That's her," he said, voice rough. I didn't argue, because I believed him. Then a voice came from behind us, close enough that I felt it before I fully heard it. "You came anyway," Dale said. I turned and saw him 10 feet away at the tree line, standing in shade, posture relaxed like he had nowhere else to be. His right hand held something low, kept out of full view by his thigh. I didn't need to see details to understand what it meant. The way he carried it said he had done this before. Dale looked past me toward Micah and smiled slightly. "2 of you," he said. "That makes it interesting." Micah stepped half a foot in front of me, which was brave and also not smart. Dale didn't flinch. Dale spoke in an even tone, like he was talking about weather. He said people came out there thinking they disappeared, but they didn't disappear. They just walked into a place where a person could take time. He said he didn't like crowds. He said he liked quiet. He said he didn't like outsiders acting like they owned land they couldn't protect. I asked him where my cousin's truck key was. I asked him where Kara was. I kept my voice flat, because emotion would feed him. Dale's eyes stayed steady. "Your cousin ran," he said. "The vest lady didn't run. She tried to act brave." Micah's hand tightened into a fist. Dale watched it and gave a small nod, like he enjoyed watching people decide what kind of violence they were capable of. I made a decision fast, because standing there meant dying slow. I swung my pack up and threw it at Dale's face, not to knock him out, but to make him blink and shift his weight. The pack hit his cap brim and his shoulder. Dale's hand jerked up on instinct. That half second was enough. I grabbed Micah's sleeve and pulled him toward the trees. We ran hard, choosing the tight spaces where branches would slow a taller man, where brush would snag clothing, where a clear line of sight would break. I did not want to find out how good Dale was when he got a clean angle. Behind us, I heard Dale move. I didn't hear panic. I didn't hear hurry. I heard controlled pursuit, the sound of someone who believed the woods belonged to him. Micah whispered through clenched teeth that he couldn't see the trail. I told him to keep his eyes up and follow my shoulders. I knew my own land, and I knew one route that could buy time. A small creek cut through the timber, shallow in summer, but steep enough on both sides to shape movement. Years earlier, hunters had laid a narrow plank bridge across it, more for convenience than safety. It wasn't pretty, but it held weight if you crossed it carefully. We hit the creek line and sprinted toward the bridge. Micah looked back once and cursed under his breath. I didn't look back. I didn't want to stumble. I didn't want hesitation. We crossed the planks fast. They flexed under our boots and groaned in a way that made my skin crawl. When we reached the far bank, Micah grabbed the axe he had carried from my cabin without me noticing, and he pointed to the thick rope that anchored the bridge to a pine. His eyes met mine. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The choice was obvious and ugly. If we cut the rope, we cut our fastest way back. If we didn't, we gave Dale a straight crossing. I nodded once. Micah swung the axe into the rope. The first strike cut strands. The second strike finished it. The bridge sagged, then dropped into the creek with a heavy slap of wood and water. Dale burst into view at the opposite bank as it fell. He reached for the planks, caught one, and went down with it. Water splashed up around him, and the boards pinned his legs at an angle. He didn't cry out. He didn't plead. He stared at us with pure anger, like we had stolen something from him. Micah grabbed my shoulder and yanked me back from the bank. "Move," he said, and we ran again, pushing uphill toward the access road. The climb burned my legs. Sweat stung my eyes. Every few seconds I expected a sound behind us that meant Dale had freed himself. The woods stayed quiet, and that quiet felt loaded, like a held breath. We broke out onto the old access road and ran along it until we saw the first sign of normal life, a dusty pickup crawling along with a couple inside, probably locals checking on the search. Micah waved both arms and stepped into the road like he didn't care about being hit. The truck stopped hard. The driver's eyes widened as he looked between us and the trees behind us. Micah told him to call 911. He told him a man had been killed in a clearing and a search volunteer was down. He told him the suspect was armed and close. The driver grabbed his phone and started dialing. His passenger stared at the woods like she expected someone to step out at any moment. We stayed with them because we needed witnesses, and we needed a vehicle if Dale showed up. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then we saw flashing lights filtering through trees, and the relief that hit me made my hands shake. Deputies arrived first, then a state investigator. They treated us like people who had seen something too sharp, not like suspects. They asked where it happened. They asked what the man looked like. They asked where Kara's group was staged. They asked if we had any weapons. Micah answered steady. I answered short. I pointed. I led them. When we reached my cabin, one deputy took one look at my sliced fuel line and his jaw set. He didn't say much, but I could see his tone change. This wasn't a lost hiker situation anymore. This was a person working. They moved to the clearing with training, spreading out, watching flanks, keeping distance. I told them exactly what we found, where Landon lay, where the jar sat, where the tarp shelter was. I didn't dramatize anything because the scene didn't need help. They found Kara under the tarp shelter. She was alive, but barely. Her wrists were bound. Her mouth was dry and cracked. Her eyes struggled to focus. A medic spoke to her calmly while they cut her free and stabilized her. When Kara tried to speak, it came out as a whisper that didn't carry. The medic leaned in and told her to save it. They found Landon and covered him. They photographed the area. They bagged items. They treated the jar of keys like it was radioactive, lifting it carefully into evidence packaging. They found more than I expected. Farther back into the trees, they located another small shelter and a shallow pit covered with brush. They didn't show me details, but I saw enough to understand why the investigator's face went rigid. That pit held answers for families, and those answers were not the kind that bring relief. They also found Dale. A deputy called out that they had eyes on a male subject near the creek. I didn't go closer than the road, but I watched from a distance as they approached with weapons ready, shouting commands. Dale was wedged near the broken planks, soaked, injured, and still alert. Even pinned and surrounded, he carried himself like a man who believed he could talk his way out. He tried to speak as they cuffed him. The deputy told him to stop talking. Dale kept talking anyway, words I couldn't hear, lips moving like he had a script. They loaded him into a cruiser. He didn't look at me once. He stared straight ahead like I wasn't worth remembering, which felt like a final insult. As the scene settled, a sheriff's lieutenant stood with Micah and me near my porch. He kept his voice low, professional, and controlled, but I could hear the strain in it. "That man's name is Dale Mercer," he said. "He's wanted out of Arkansas. He skipped on supervision and disappeared into places like this. We've had open cases that started to make sense only after today." Micah asked about the missing fisherman. The lieutenant nodded and said they had located the fisherman's truck by the creek days ago. Keys gone, wallets left behind, and now the jar explained why. He said they had to confirm identities before notifying families. He said the search had turned into an investigation that would last months. I asked one question that had been in my head since I saw the blue tarp. "Why the blue strips?" I said. The lieutenant looked past me at the tree line like he didn't want to answer. Then he said it anyway. "We found blue tarp in one of his previous sites," he said. "He used it like a path. He used it to guide himself back. He used it to guide others in." He paused, then added something that stuck with me more than the body and the jar and the broken bridge. "He also used it to test people," the lieutenant said. "People who saw it and ignored it walked away. People who followed it ended up where he wanted." That night, after statements and photographs and medical checks, Micah drove me out. I didn't argue. I didn't ask to stay. My cabin no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a location on somebody else's map. As we rolled down the access road, I watched the trees slide by and tried to picture the woods before Dale found them. I tried to picture the missing people walking in with coolers and gear and full water bottles, thinking they had planned for everything. Micah asked if I wanted to go back for my things. I told him no. I told him I could replace tools. I could replace panels. I could replace a cabin. What I couldn't replace was the feeling of being watched in a place I built to be unseen. When we hit the paved road, I looked down at my hands. I still had dirt under my nails from the roof work, like the day had tried to be normal right up until it couldn't. I left the grid to get away from people, and all it did was put me in a place where the wrong person could take his time.